like me to introduce Billy? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, take it away.
Okay. I couldn't tell. I've had computer problems from the start of the meeting, so hopefully we can get through this. But it's my honor and my privilege to introduce our speaker today. I first heard Billy Taylor speak at a heart-to-heart breakfast about 3 years ago. He gave a very encouraging word for the Akron community. And then most recently, I was introduced to him by a mutual friend, Robert DeJournette. Billy and I had a nice time over breakfast about 2.5 weeks ago, and it allowed me the opportunity to get to know him. And most of you probably know that he served in a role at Goodyear for a number of years, and he was in charge of diversity and inclusion. And recently he stepped away and gone into his own business. And maybe if he has time, we'll share a little bit about that. But what I wanted to say about Billy and what I have found to be impressive and encouraging is he shared some of his story about his family and growing up in Texas, about his mother, is that Billy is a father, and that carries a lot of weight in today's world. And he's a real fine mentor for so many young people, and above and beyond that, he's just an excellent human being. So it's my pleasure and my honor to introduce Billy as he comes and shares with us today. So welcome, Billy.
Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you all for having me today. I'm excited to be here, coming to you from North Baltimore, Ohio. So that's the brick wall behind me. So I'm in a factory, but I'm excited to be here, and I was honored when I was asked to speak to you and to share my story. Just a little bit about my background. I spent 30 years with Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, and I ran operations at first. For the first 29 years of my career, I ran the operations, the manufacturing of tires. And then I transitioned into a diversity and inclusion role. But what I found in the transition were things that I had been reared in and things my mother taught me about people-driven excellence. Were consistent. They're consistent in managing diversity and inclusion. And so I'm going to share some of those things with you today. And then I'm going to open it up for dialogue. You may ask some questions for me. And I'm going to share with you some slides that I've used to tell my story at some of the world's largest conferences, to interact with people and businesses around not only diversity and inclusion, but investing in yourself. And I'm going to start there. In my career at Goodyear, I wasn't the most likely one to rise through the ranks. I remember starting there and I was really afraid. And my mother was very transparent with me. She says, always, son, have a standard. What's your standard in life? And then after you establish that standard, don't accept anything less, because what you accept, you cannot change. And that, she says, throughout time, that will be your greatest lesson. And I'm going to talk about how that lesson was repeated and cycled throughout my career. Most importantly, when I interviewed for my first job, it was with Pepsi Cola. And it was interesting. And I was going to play the minority card. I'm going to be very transparent with you on this call. So I go to the interview. I'm an honor student in engineering. There's very few Blacks on the interview panel. And so I go to the interview. I do not prepare. I figure my grades and that platform would get me to the next level. I was sadly mistaken. I walk into the interview. I look down. I don't shake the man's hand. He says, tell me about my company. I say, you make soft drinks. He said, well, then tell me, how diverse are we? And then I did the best I could. And he wanted me to say they work for Taco Bell, Frito-Lay, Kentucky Fried Chicken. They own all these companies. They're very diverse. And he says, young man, how diverse are we? And I gave it the best answer I could. And I said, you put it in a can and a bottle. He sits back, he goes, you haven't did your homework. I says, no, sir. And when I finished, he proceeded to tell me, this is the worst interview I've ever seen. He says, the only thing you did right in this interview was not lie. I was devastated. And at that point, he went on to give me some advice around how you should dress, how you should show up, how you should invest in you, because it's like banking. And if you don't invest into yourself, how can you withdraw anything out of yourself? And so I go through the interview and I couldn't wait to get out of the office. I leave the interview. I call my mother and I tell her the story, and she tells me, I'm ashamed of you. You violated your standard. You didn't prep, you didn't show up. The next interview I had was with Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. Now let me tell you how that interview went. I ironed my suit probably 3 times. I laid that shirt out. I went to the library and I got a stack of brochures and I set those brochures right on the top of the desk. And when I went to talking about Goodyear, and I said, yeah, you were almost taken over by Goldsmith. You operate in 4 regions, Asia, Europe, Latin America, North America. And if you don't do this, your stock's going to crater. And he's looking at me like, where did this kid come from, Mars? And he's going on and on. And when we finished, and I'm shaking his hand, I don't let go. I'm shaking his hand. I'm looking him in the eye, all the things my mother had taught me about the standard. And when he finally gets his hand back, he says, young man, we're going to interview 10 more candidates and we'll get back with you in 2 weeks. This was on a Thursday. We're in Chicago. I leave. Before I could get home, he called my house. They called my house and says, my mother picked up the phone. They said, hello. And they said, this is Billy Taylor in. She says, no, he isn't. May I take a message? And they said, well, we'd like to talk to him about his interview. And she says, well, how did he do? And they said, well, we'd like to talk to him about it. She said, well, you may as well tell me, because he's going to have to run this by me if he's going to take a job. And they said, well, ma'am, he did pretty good. She said, well, good. Are you going to offer him a job or what? And they said, well, we think it. Yes, ma'am. She says, good. He'll take it. When does he start? Now, what I'll tell you about that is, if that person wouldn't have been honest with me, first of all, in the Pepsi interview, I would have never been prepared to go to the Pepsi interview. So what I want to talk about to leaders today, how transparent are you when you're investing in your team and you're developing your team members? 2, sometimes it's not a glass ceiling that holds you back, it's your sticky floor. Things that you should be doing for yourself that you don't do. And see, I could have easily blamed people, that reason why I failed that interview, but it was solely on me and things that I had to do to help myself. And last but not least, have a standard. What is your standard? Now, I took that job with Goodyear, and I spent 30 years with that company, and it was a great career. But there are some things around people-driven excellence that it starts with people. It starts with, you can't manage a secret. And oftentimes we try to keep things a secret instead of investing in sharing and growing talent. I thought athletics was my way out. I knew it was my way out. My mother didn't see that. My mother didn't believe in sports as a way to a better life. She believed in education. That was her standard. And she would always say, trust the process. Trust your process. But here's the thing she asked me once that I'll never forget. And it was before I took a job opportunity. She asked me a question. She said, Billy, and I told her I wasn't going to take a job. And she says, I'm disappointed in you because you don't believe in yourself and you don't trust your process. And she says, let me ask you a question. If a bird lands on a branch, does the bird trust the branch or does the bird trust its wings? And I thought about it. She says, well, let me give you a clue, but I have to get off this phone because I have to go. She says, young man, I've seen many birds land on branches, but what I have never, ever seen is a branch break and the bird fall and die. Trust your wings. Most of you know what's right. Most of you have developed and educated yourself to be successful in whatever endeavor you try, but you talk yourself out of being successful. You don't trust your wings. And you know what? You can't trust your wings if you have not developed a standard for which you're going to judge or grade or hold yourself to a method. And so by that helped rear me. And I took this assignment and I said, Mom, the standards are standard. She goes, you got it. And so I went to this plant in North Carolina, which was the worst plant in the Goodyear footprint at that time, but we transitioned the whole plant and it became one of the best running plants in our footprint. But I want to share with you, how did that happen? Okay, and I'm going to share my screen right now to share with you some slides that I like to show you around excellence, around driving excellence in your company, in your personal life. Okay. All right, it's loading up now, so let's slow, I think. So the first slide you see up there is you cannot manage a secret. And this is where most leaders fail. This is where companies fail, because in the absence of ownership comes blame. And if people don't know what they own, then they spend the majority of the day blaming somebody else for why something didn't happen. But if you're going to drive excellence through people, they have to know. And I'm going to show you, and this is a graph that I used to use when I went into plants and I would do my initial assessment. This is how most companies look. And you've heard drive accountability. 5% of the people at the top believe they make everything happen. 15% watch and let things happen. And 80% of your people in every company, every sports team, they wait to be told what to do. Here's my mother's philosophy. 80% of the people will make things happen in your life if you engage them. Now, leaders must enable, as if your children, your children's going to live their life. My mother would say this: if I fight your fight, I steal your victory. How many of you do that with your teams? You're so busy fighting their fight, you don't realize that you're stealing their victory instead of enabling them to be successful. See, I want my children, my personal children, to go through some of the struggles while they're young. See, those are small problems. See, if I prep them to deal with small problems, when they become adults, they know how to deal with big problems. And as a parent, as a leader, it's my job to help them with vision and strategy. But I'm going to go back. The most powerful word in the world is no. I'm going to share with you. And I want everybody, before I put it up, write the word no down. The most powerful word in the world is no. Write it down for me. Okay. I'm going to ask you to be transparent and go into the chat room and write down what word did you write. What word did you write down when I asked you to write no? Write it, please, because I don't want anyone changing their minds cheating. What did you write down? Okay, I'm looking at some of them. Thank you for those that are participating. Okay, all right. Some N-O, some K-N-O-W. Now, let me tell you why that I want you to write that down. If you wrote no, here's what I realized throughout my career. When I said the most powerful word in the world is no, no means stop, fear, failure. Don't go forward. The word no, K-N-O-W, means to understand, embrace, and take action. But what I'll tell you, it shifts in your mind. And here's what I tell you. If you look at this here, what's on the screen, and it says opportunity is nowhere. Okay? Now, when I like you to look to the right, it's identical. The way it's spelled, it's identical. But what shifts is your mindset when you start to know and understand things, and it's no longer a secret. You start looking at things as this opportunity is now here. Identical letters, what shifts is the mindset. And that's why I tell you, you can't manage a secret. When you engage your people, like my mother engaged my brothers and I, we knew what we owned. And I tell the story when I played football. I was a great athlete. And now I want you to just take this with a grain of salt. The older I get, the better I was, okay? I wasn't that good, okay? That's why I'm behind this computer screen right now, okay? But in the 8th grade, I would run that football and I'd score multiple touchdowns. But my mother set a standard in our house that we had to have a B average or we couldn't play. Well, I made an F a week before the city championship, which we were going to play, and we were favored by 20 points. And she took me off the team. How could she do that? How could she ruin my life like that? And guess what I told her? Mom, you're not fair. Right? I didn't own anything, so I blamed her. And what she did was clarify what the standard was, is that we agreed that if you made anything less than a B, you couldn't play. And NFL in our house at that point meant not for long would you be playing. Okay? And so when she took me off the team, I felt at that point, how could she do this to me? Well, years later, my best friend at his funeral, we lined the coffin, and all of my friends came around the coffin and said, we don't remember that game. And most of us don't even know the score. But what we never forgot is the standard your mother held you to. And it impacted our lives. It changed what we focused on, and it drove our decisions to go to college. Now I'm going to come back to why that's important. It centers in life on human needs. We all have human needs, and we want to be valued. But you know what? None of those rings mean anything today. And only one of them was because I played sports. They were because I helped the Dallas Mavericks build their D-League strategy to put that in place. And they won back-to-back championships in a Premier League. And it was because of the business plan we put together. So guess what? My mother was right. Her core values centered on me building a base where I invested in myself. She had principles that she would not compromise on any of her standards. And last, remember, the standard will always be the standard. So what's your standard? Now, let's talk about the 4 fundamental human needs. For me, people need to be heard. So you have to listen to different viewpoints. People want to be understood. People do not like their biases thrust on others. And that's why my mother would say, you need to understand and embrace your unique differences. So when I go in and lead teams, I build a system where there's cross-pollination of what people are trying to tell me and what I understand. And you know what? People need to matter. I have a saying, if you make people visible, they will make you valuable. And often leaders and families and you know what, my kids, and I'll tell you, as a young child, they love your presence. That's your bikes, your Xboxes. As they move into teens and even adults, they love your presence. Okay, they want you to show up. They want to see you. And I'm going to talk about how that changed my son's life later on in the presentation, right? And because we get so caught up in giving people gifts, the presents, that we miss the value of presence, okay? And people want to be trusted. It's that feeling of being emancipated. I don't care who you are and how old you are. But you know what? The best leaders I know is like my mom. You create a safe place to change. And this is a picture. She's the CEO of Mid-Michigan Medical. And she invited me to speak to her annual operating team. And this was in Michigan. And notice how she's dressed, like a princess. And I'm thinking, what is she doing? She's the chief operating officer, chief executive officer, I'm sorry. And so we give this presentation around engaging people. And she says, Billy, I'd like you to come up front and dance. We're going to close the operating meeting. I'm thinking, what are you thinking? You're going to dance? She goes, yes. Now think about this here. This is an untraditional way of thinking because she has a room full of millennials. And we get so caught up in our old paradigms that we miss the point. See, the worst thing you can do is know enough about a subject to know when you're right, but not know enough about something to know when you're wrong. And so what she did, she invites me up to speak. And I said, thank you. And she said, let's dance. Now I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to have a little fun. I'm going to stereotype myself. Okay. Black guy, you're going to call me up there. I got a little rhythm, right? I'm ready to dance. I even can do my Kenny Chesney if you want me to. So we get there. I got my line dance ready just in case. And there's probably 3 blacks in the whole audience. And the music comes on and I'm shocked. The music comes on and says, so watch me whip, so watch me nay-nay. And I turn around, I look at her, I'm thinking, what are you thinking? You're the CEO. Why would you be playing that music? 10 seconds later, what do you think I start doing? So watch me whip, so watch me nay-nay. What do you think the whole audience, ranging from ages of 18 to 62, what do you think they're doing in the audience? So watch me, nay-nay. And I thought, wow, what a lesson. What did she do? She created a safe environment so people could change. How many of us don't do that with our children? We don't do that with our teams. We want so much control instead of passing down ownership. And at some point, your teams plateau because you didn't create an environment, right, to facilitate the change that you're inspiring. And so in that case, your organization stall out. And it's critical because we get so caught up in measuring things. And we try to measure everything because we've been taught in society to measure what matters. But what I tell you is everything that matters cannot be measured. I often cry because I miss my mother. I miss her presence. I miss the things she taught me. I miss the investment she made in myself. And she also taught me about diversity and inclusion. She would say, muscle can split a shield and even destroy life, but only the unseen power of love can capture the heart of any person. And she would say, son, don't you ever forget that. And so when I went to this place called Tyler, Texas, they had some severe racial issues and racial tension. And they only asked me to take the assignment because they had no African Americans on the staff. What was shocking to me was when I arrived in town on Sunday, I received a call and told me not to come out of my hotel room because the person I was replacing had not been notified. And this plant was running so bad that they had senior leaders coming down, the corporate jet coming down almost on a weekly basis. And so I'm nervous, I'm scared. I don't want to go into the plant. I mean, they just call it what it was. I mean, the tension, because I'm hearing stories about, some horror stories about what's happening in the plant. So I show up when they finally called me, and here's where it got really scary. I showed up at the plant. I walked through the plant. I get called in the office, and they fire the plant manager and hand me the keys and says, hold on until we hire somebody. Now I'm in a place that's in disarray, very little diversity and inclusion. Fast forward, 2 years later, it's the best running plant in the footprint. What happened? One, I had a standard. 2, I engaged everyone so they knew what they owned. So no wasn't the answer. No was the answer. And 3, you make people visible, they'll make you valuable. And the greatest compliment was a lady that pulled me to the side, and I get choked up about it today, when she said, Billy, you made us see the soul of a man versus the color of that man's skin. I am so grateful you came to work with us. And you know what? Not only did you change our lives, I think we have changed your life. And I said, that's right, because we invested in each other. Now, let me share something with you. I'm going to go back personal. Although the company measured profits, they figured that's what mattered. I did not. I measured actions. Key performance actions deliver key performance indicators. See, KPAs are what great leaders focus on. They don't focus on the KPIs. See, what's the key performance action? I get those business people say, oh, those are leading indicators. I said nothing about an indicator. I said a key performance action. If I want to lose weight, I can't stand on the scale every morning and start screaming and say, what happened? What's wrong? That's a KPI. A KPA says, I'm going to eat right. I'm going to work out. I'm going to eat so many carbs. And if I do these things consistently, I'll get that one thing I want. And so as a parent, as a husband, as a business person, as a board member, right? Those at the Urban League, as a board member, I work for them. They don't work for me. It's my job to enable them. That's my mindset. My job is to work for Teresa. And so when I look at that in life, I want to share a story with you. This is my son. And he played basketball at St. Vincent St. Mary's High School. And as you see him, they won the state championship. But let me tell you the story behind the story. We had standards, and we went to the gym every morning at 5:30, and we put up 200 shots. And the goal was to make 60% of those shots every day. And we figured if he could make 60% of those shots, he would get on the court. So every day at 5:30, we'd ride, and he'd get to play his favorite music on the way to the gym. One day, I played my favorite music from Motown on the day that I liked. So every day we went back and forth. And then, you know, he gets his car, and he follows me to the gym. And this is the day before they're leaving to go play the state championship. And I said, son, I can't stage this morning. I have to go to a meeting. And my son shoots 323 shots, and he makes a whopping 87%. A great day by any player standard. That's a great day by LeBron standards. But look at his face. He's sad. So I called him right away, and I said, son, what's the problem? He goes, what do you mean, Dad? I shot 87%. I says, what's the look on your face for? And he says, Dad, today, everything came to life for me. It became very clear that all those days we went to the gym to shoot those shots, you didn't go to the gym with me to shoot shots. You're showing me how to be a good person, a good father. You know what, Dad? When I made that 87%, it felt empty because you weren't here. And he said, Dad, I'll never remember all the games you came to, but I'll never forget the 2 you missed. And he says, Dad, what really made me cry was I remember a man asking you, how do you have time to coach? And without any hesitation, you answered, I don't have time to golf. You have time. And he says, Dad, your presence for me was everything. And I don't have that no more when I get to drive. Now think about that. When he thought we were measuring what matters, shooting 6%, 60%, what really mattered couldn't be measured. And so as they won the championship, if you notice, the room's clear. Here's what happened when my son won the championship. He didn't run to cut down the net. He didn't run to the trophy. He ran to Dad and we cried for probably 3 to 5 minutes. We cried because the presence is what we embrace most. How many of you on this phone put your job, put everything else ahead of what matters most? And I'm not looking for an answer. I'm just being transparent. I have no regrets when it comes to that because I didn't miss it. I missed very few events when it came to my kids because I learned that from my mother. You know what? I had a standard around being a parent. Here's what my son texts me. He says, Dad, I'm crying in the car thinking about you, Dad. I love you. You understand what you've done for me. My only reply was to my son was, I love you, son, more than what's comprehensive. You bring me joy. I'm blessed, God. Let me be your dad. See, often we focus on things and prioritize things that are outside our standard. I'm going to ask you to write this down. I don't care who you are, what you do. I want you to write these 3 things down because this is my standard to everything I do in life and in my personal life and my business life. Here's what the great ones do. First, they define winning. So I'm going to ask you to write that down. Define winning. Have you clearly defined winning? What is winning for you? In your personal life, what's winning for you on your job? After you've defined winning, have you aligned yourself to win? So number 2, aligning to win. What is it you have to do to get to that destination where you want to go? See, that's where your standard starts to take place. And the last one, how do you know if you're executing winning? So the last one is execute winning. So if you're leading any team, you should be able to answer those 3 questions. Have you clearly defined winning? Have you aligned yourself to win? Does everybody know what they own in your strategy? If they don't know what they own in your strategy, then your strategy is a secret. And guess what I just said? You can't manage a secret. And last, how do you know if you're executing winning? If you brought your whole team around the table and ask if we're winning or not, and they give you the shrug, then as a leader, you have to go back and recalibrate. I want to end with this. And this is personal for me. I've led many teams, and being transparent about where you have gaps and owning those gaps and working through your implicit biases. We all have them. I don't care who you are. So to close, an all-expense trip vacation. And I'm going to ask you to close your eyes to go on this vacation with me. Okay? We're going to go on a vacation. So, to your favorite destination, close your eyes. We just get through the airport and you make it to your plane just in time. The pilot greets you. Welcome aboard. We have you in business class. You walk through business class and then the stewardess greets you and says, can I get your favorite beverage? And sits you down and give you the magazine. You land, everything's great. You go to this nice conference and the CEO speaks, walks out on stage and gives you this dynamic speech. And then you get done and you go back and guess what? You're with this couple. You go to dinner with this couple that's there with you and your spouse and y'all have a great dinner. And you know what? While you're there, the owner of the restaurants gives you tickets to this nice game. And you go to the game, you got press seats. It's a basketball game. It goes down to the wire. At the last second, they throw this alley-oop, throw the ball, and the guy catches the ball and dunks it as time runs out and they win the game, and then you fly back home. What a great vacation. Pause, open your eyes. Now, when you got on that plane, was your pilot black, white, Latino, or Hispanic? Traditionally, how would you view that pilot? That stewardess, was it male or female? That CEO that walked out on the stage, was it male, female? What was it? That athlete that dunked that ball, was that athlete black, white, or Hispanic? Remember the old saying, white men can't jump. Really? You haven't seen Tyler Hero play for Miami Heat? Pause. My pilot was white. My stewardess was female. My CEO was white. My athlete that dunked that ball was black. You know why? Doesn't mean I can't change. But growing up, that's what I saw. Didn't make it right. But when I became chief diversity officer, guess what? The couple I had dinner with now, they weren't traditional couples, the traditional couple. You know what? I look at things differently now because I KNOW. I know better. With that, I'm going to pause and answer any questions you may have. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Billy. That was phenomenal. We are at 1 o'clock, so I think what I'd like to do, if you have a few minutes to stay on, what I'd like to do is adjourn the meeting so the business folks that have to get to their next Zoom meeting can do so. And I would be very grateful to have you stay on to have a little more discussion.
You have me. I'm here. Whatever time y'all want or whatever questions you have, please reach out to me.
All right. Well, that was awesome. So if you could stop sharing, okay. I can show the bell. That's part of our ritual.
All right.
And there's the bell and my crystal ball. That's a whole other story. The meeting is officially adjourned, and thank you, Billy Taylor.